This last work that we had before the midterm by Bellini is an example, or the first example we had of the High Renaissance. And this video is going to be about the High Renaissance, and I wanted to go back one picture so as to give the characteristics of what is the High Renaissance and how it differs from the Renaissance proper. Vasari, who was the first historian, wrote in the 1500s the lives of the artists. He wrote it as a long progression or evolution of art from the very beginnings with Giotto, and how it had become better and better with each generation. And by the time it got to his generation, it was at the pinnacle. It was as good as it could get. Now, this is kind of a value judgment by somebody from the period, but let's just go with it. What changed from Giotto to the Renaissance and throughout the 100 years from 1400 to 1500 was that artists became more skillful at representing the real world and also at representing idealized version of the world. The tools that they had, painting, modeling figures in space, linear perspective, going from frescoes to oil, and the use of these materials, these tools, and the influence from the north of bringing in an interest in surface detail. All these things came together, and by the time you get to like the 1480s, 1485 or so, they have reached the pinnacle. They have reached about as good as you could get as far as the representation of the natural world. This Bellini, as you can see, I mean, it is incredible when you look up at the detail of it and the realism qualities of it. But there are other qualities that are particular to the High Renaissance over and above just the technical skills. One is symmetry. Okay, this work is bilaterally symmetrical along the vertical axis. It has what they call a pyramidal composition. This isn't the perfect example of it. Pyramidal means or pyramid or a triangular kind of thing, where something is sitting on its base. This group isn't actually making a triangle in this case, but Mary makes a kind of a triangle, and this line here from I believe this is Job goes down to the base. It creates a triangle sitting on its base is a very stable, calm geometric shape, and having a composition where things are symmetrical and things are on a base so that they're not going to tip over. Everything looks calm. There's no tension in the sense of it looks like something's about to move, or that something's about to tip over, or there's some action about to happen. It's as if everything is frozen in time and it's a timeless world. And it's an idealized world where everything that could be perfected has been perfected. The perspective in this picture is absolutely dead center, and the vanishing point is right on the bottom line. The figures have an idealized proportion that is as good as it ever got in terms of being like the antique. This figure looks as close to a Greek statue as you can get, and all of the surfaces have the maximum amount of surface detail. All these things are making it High Renaissance. Then there's the decorum. Decorum means that everything is proper. That it's, I suppose it means that things are idealized. Things are made as the world would be if everything were perfect. Then there's gravitas. It means weightiness. That the subjects are weighty subjects. They're not genre scenes of everyday life there. Uh, this is Madonna and Child with saints, and it's a big deal sort of picture, and that's also a high Renaissance thing. When you think of the high Renaissance, there's not a lot of examples of still lives or genre-based pictures. I introduced this so you can see what generally is the high Renaissance, and what would be in common for most of the things in the period. It goes from the 1480s to about 1520. 1520, it's over because Leonardo has died and Raphael has died, and there were other changes around that time. So it cuts off and things change. I think the sack of Rome also is around that time. So the world is different afterwards, and there's a very different style. The Mannerist will be a style afterwards, and there's a reaction against the high Renaissance. So knowing what the characteristics are that make something a high Renaissance is important. Now, we're going to begin here with Leonardo, and he would be his work, beginning with the 1480s, I guess, would be high Renaissance work. And so he is a particular instance, and I want to show the things about him that are unique to him. But what I was just saying was, what are things that are generally about high Renaissance? When we get to Leonardo, Leonardo is different from the other artists in many respects. One of the big ones is his curiosity about the world, the natural world, the world of machines, the world of nature, and all of the problems of nature, how water works, how air works, how light works, how vision works, the human body, anatomy, proportions. He looked into proportions with a goal towards looking to discovering some sort of like a unified field theory of numbers, related numbers that govern the whole world. He had this curiosity that was not directed towards learning how to paint better or to draw better or to sculpt better or anything like that. He didn't have, typically, he didn't have any goal in mind. He just had a curiosity. He would just study things that he was interested in, and he would just focus on them and obsess over them, I guess. And when you compare him to other artists who were essentially, craftsmen, and to a large extent, and they, as craftsmen, they learned their trade, and they got jobs, and they did their work, and they understood how to do things that they had a knack for drawing and painting and sculpting, whatever, and they did their business. They got business done. Leonardo was not like that. He often didn't get business done. He wasn't very reliable. He didn't finish things, and he spent forever doing things because he didn't want to commit himself to any one solution to a problem. His imagination was just so running wild all the time that he continually thought of new solutions to a problem, so he didn't want to commit to any solution. So he's a very strange personality. He's very different from the other artists who were more practically bent. Now, this work is a Vitruvian Man, and it's a drawing of it illustrates something from Vitruvius. Vitruvius is a Roman architect from the 1st century BC, and presumably lots of architects at the time, Roman architects, wrote treatises on architecture, but this happened to be the only one that continued to exist into the Renaissance. All the others were lost. So he was the definitive authority on architecture and design to a large extent, and he was the guy to go to because he was the Roman voice of anything that had to do with architecture. In it, he talks about the design elements that you use for architecture, the square and the circle, as how important they are. And the square is related, both the square and the circle are related to the human body, in that when a man's arms are outstretched, the distance between his fingertips are equal to his height. in the same way that a square is equal to its sides are equal to its height. And also, if he said if a man lies down on the ground with his arms out, his navel becomes the center of a circle that touches his fingertips and his feet. Vitruvius wasn't illustrated, and other people before Leonardo had attempted to illustrate this. Typically, they would illustrate one or the other, or separate illustrations for the two different, the square and the circle. But Leonardo put them together as one, and it's kind of a unique thing. I don't know that any other artist before this ever did any kind of illustration like this. It's one of its unique qualities. Having two different views of a person superimposed one upon the other, it seems like a normal way to illustrate something like this to our eyes, because it seemed we're so familiar with it. But I imagine that when this was drawn, that it was the first time that anyone had seen anything like this. Vitruvius also went into the different kinds of proportions within the body. For example, how many heads high a figure is, how many different units, the forearm, the palm, the length of the nose. I mean, the face is divided into thirds, at the eyes, and the nose, and the mouth. And those different measures will measure into the height of a figure certain numbers of times. And the relationships between those numbers, like between 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, several of the ratios of the single-digit numbers all have their analog in the human figure somewhere, and Leonardo is illustrating those things. But in addition to illustrating, he's also measuring, looking for more. I've examined this drawing. It's in Venice in the Accademia, and I got the access to look at it. And one of the things that you can't see in any kind of reproduction of it is along this line. There's a lot of point indentations of a compass, where Leonardo measured some part of the body with his compass, with dividers, and then walked those down the length of this side in order to see how many times that measure would go into this height. And he did it, so that there's hundreds of little points. So he wanted to look for more. He wanted to see what are all the relationships. He had to draw a figure that fit exactly what Vitruvius was talking about, and it couldn't be just any figure. It had to be one where the width and the height and the length of every part had to work with the numbers and ratios that Vitruvius talked about. He had drawn this on another piece of paper. This was not the one that the construction occurred on. He transferred the image onto this piece of paper from another that no longer exists, but one can infer the existence of the other one because the construction marks are not on this one. They're all of the lines, the main lines of this drawing, are visible as little indentations, like what you would see if he had taken a drawing on another piece of paper and put it over this piece of paper and drew on top of the upper piece of paper with a stylus and pressed into the lines of the figure so that the impression would go through to the piece of paper underneath it. So what he would have is a clean copy that he could draw and doesn't have any of the extraneous marks perhaps that the other one had, or the pentimenti marks, that is his changes of mind, and maybe he had to change the length where the knee is, or some other feature in order to get everything to fit just right. But once he had this clean copy and the points where the compass was going to go and where all of these, how wide to make the compass and how to where the points of the square were going to be, he transferred those to this piece of paper so that he could make a clean copy. And then he wrote in his backwards writing the stuff that Vitruvius was saying, and also the proportions that he was discovering from it. So it's a neat drawing. I mean, it shows him all over in terms of his obsession with the proportions, his enormous skill in draftsmanship, his creating of a kind of an icon that represents science and thought and human abilities, and the fact that man is the measure of all things. All these qualities are within this drawing, and it's probably one of the most famous drawings in the world. So let's look at a painting from in the 1480s. This is Madonna of the Rocks, and I'm looking at two different versions of the same painting. The one on the left is from Paris, and the one on the right is from London. And the one on the left, I think, is the original one that was done first, and the other one is made from the same cartoon by his studio, though he had a hand in to a large degree in the one on the right. The one on the left is the one that we have in your book, and the one that is on your list. I just wanted to show you the two, how similar they are, and also how different they are. The color on the right is much cleaner in every way, and the one on the left is a little bit hazy and warmer, and it looks like the varnish on it has aged and yellowed, and it hasn't been cleaned. I think lots of things in the Louvre have not been cleaned, especially the most valuable things that they're afraid to clean it, I guess, because it would that they would ruin it if they did. So I think the London one has been cleaned, so it looks newer. But this is look at this and through what I was talking about before of what a high Renaissance picture is basically symmetrical with a pyramidal composition. It has decorum. It's quiet. There's nothing going on in it. It's very calm. The figures are rendered, with absolute reality in terms of their position in space, the volume of the forms with modeling, surface textures of everything are accurate in every way. It's filled with all sorts of details, so similar to what was only a quality of Northern art, where all the little flowers and plants are specific botanical, accurate botanical illustrations of whatever the thing they are representing. But what's unique to Leonardo, is different from the other artists at the time, is that he includes other aspects of his own version of high Renaissance. Is that he likes mystery. He likes to have ambiguity. It's a little odd in that it's hard to tell exactly what's going on, why this angel is looking out almost at us and then pointing at the figure of John the Baptist. And he wasn't even supposed to add John the Baptist in the picture. It wasn't part of the commission. Why is there all these rocks back here? It's not just any kind of rock, but it's kind of a, primeval world. It's a world when the earth was young. And it looks wild, but it's an organized sort of wild. Wonderful design of the whole thing, the relationship between all these masses that are framing the figures and relating to the figures. I believe it's a golden rectangle, and the continuation of the circle at the top, goes through this little part of the Virgin's garment here, and there's all sorts of other lines that occur within the geometry of the rectangle, but they're much more subtle than, say, Masaccio did. This background is dark, and it has high value contrast over here, but it's basically a dark thing, and also the figures themselves, they kind of, especially the garment of the Virgin here, is all blends into its background. More so if you look on the one on the right, it's not clear cut. I mean, you think of things like Botticelli, Piero della Francesca. Most of those, when you look at them, they're linear. The edges of things are very clear cut, and you could if you had a reproduction, you could cut them out with scissors because they're so clearly defined. The lighting of the world in most Florentine Renaissance pictures is just brightly lit, so everything is clear. Leonardo likes mystery. He puts a lot of light and shadow in there for a kind of to make it look like the real world is. The real world's not lit so much all the time. And he liked the idea of one of the things about what we call now the figure ground problem for artists. When you have a figure against the ground, you have to resolve the problem of making two opposites fit together in the same world. And one solution to the figure ground problem is just dissolving the line between figure and ground. And he did that plenty in many of his works. We'll see some of that later. The connection's lost. That's okay. Let's look at the drawing. Leonardo made a lot of drawings. I think there are about 6,000 of them in all. I think I've seen maybe, 3,000 of them. And they're wonderful things. His draftsmanship skill is just, unbelievable. Everything he put his hands to. But one of the things that's unique about him, that's different from, the preceding generations of Italian artists, is his changes of mind. Look very closely. This is a very simple example of it. But this figure, this is the angel. If we look, the angel that's in the painting is looking out at it. This is the drawing for it, and this line right here, there's actually 2 or 3 of them going here, and there's also multiple lines here. They're called pentimenti lines. They're the lines that the process of drawing was to first guess at where the form's going to be, and then you respond to that, and you change it and move it around until you get it to where you want it. And at the end of the drawing, you can still see where those first guesses were, and they are, they record the artist's penance, I guess, was one way to I've heard it called, or thoughts of the drawing. And this one has just a few simple lines to indicate it. It took him a couple of tries to find out where the edge of the face was going to be. But there are drawings where Leonardo just changed the composition over and over and over and over and over again, especially when he was working with Madonna and Child, and John and St. Anne, and sometimes he had multiple figures, and he would try every conceivable combination, continually thinking of new ways to do it, and not wanting to commit to any. And the record in the pentimenti lines is just of innumerable trial and error examples. And he invented this. I think before him, artists didn't do that. There are a few drawings by earlier artists where there was a couple of changes, but the kind of thing that I'm talking about with Leonardo was new, and it becomes something that later artists are going to do who follow him. You look at the Mannerist drawings, Pontormo, for example, people later in the Baroque. It became part of the academic drawing style, is to try lots of different things, and it was Leonardo who began that. Here's a closer-up picture of the world that he created in the background. It's all mysterious with lots of plants and rocks and things that don't seem to have any kind of explanation to them or rationale to them. I imagine that he had one, but it just looks mysterious. He also uses oil glazes to create very, very subtle color changes, and these are like layers of colored glass in order to get a deeper resonating kind of color, getting this atmospheric effect for things that the things die away towards the distance and fade away into nothing. I have another reproduction of it. It's not especially better, but you can see, probably if you find a picture in a book. I couldn't find a good one on the internet that was really clear of this painting. But these are the characteristics of Leonardo. Let's go to the Mona Lisa, the most famous picture in the world. Look at it through the lens of a high Renaissance picture, and it's got, let's zoom out a little so you can see the entire thing. It's got a pyramid, like a geometric shape on its base, so that it's very stable and calm. It is symmetrical, more or less symmetrical. It's, decorum, the person looking out at you, sitting erect, um, calmly looking at you in a timeless manner. Okay, that's high Renaissance. This was a new thing, this kind of pose for a portrait. You look at portraits before this, like the Piero's portraits that we had in the list before. Profiles were the common thing because it looks like a coin, like a Roman coin, the way portraits were made. But this kind of portrait, that's what we think of as the normal kind of portrait, is normal because he began it. And because he did this, all portraits from here on out are going to be a response to this kind of portrait. You see it over and over and over. Every portrait photographer sits somebody down to have their portrait made, looks like this. This has become the standard from this painting. You can look in your book about the history. It's a painting of a woman, a specific woman, they think, but it's not exactly known. But he never gave it to her, and he kept it with him all his life. He continually adding more and more glazes, making the subtle transitions of light and shade and color and mystery and sfumato. Let me talk about sfumato. Let's look up real close at the hands. Let me back up a little bit. Chiaroscuro is the word, the Italian word for light and dark, and it's what we talk about when it's modeling, but it's a special kind of modeling. It's where you're dealing with creating the illusion of 3D form using light and dark, and Leonardo, of course, is a master of that. The subtlety of his modeling is just out of this world. But in addition to that, there's something called sfumato. Sfumato is the Italian word for smoky, meaning that there's this subtle blending of one form to another. There's no harsh lines. If you look at the edges of things, they tend to be soft, especially, let's look at like where the sleeve meets the body over here. It just disappears into nothing. You don't see transitions as much. Things are soft on the edges. This little veil she has, makes it a softer transition between her head and the background. It even goes around here, softness and no harsh contrasts. Are what he's known for. This shawl or whatever that is a bit of fabric that's going over her shoulder. You can see that it gets its edge gets lost everywhere. And comparing this to, say, an earlier Renaissance work, if you had one where someone was wearing a garment like this, you could cut it out with scissors because it's very linear. In Botticelli, you could see the lines and everything, where every form stops and the other starts. But Leonardo likes to blend everything and soften it, and his favorite time of day was dusk, where the light is sort of, the golden hour, and things become hazy, forms transition from one to another, in this mysterious fashion. One thing I want to mention is the smile. Everybody talks about the smile for some reason. It's the odd thing about the smile, I guess, is if you look just at the mouth, she appears to be smiling. As you can see here, this is a smiling mouth, though it's a very small smile, a very delicate kind of smile. But when you look at her eyes don't appear to be smiling. And this combination of these two is that when you look at her, your eyes look at the eyes, and you see, oh, she's not smiling. You look at her mouth, oh, she is smiling. You look back over here, she's not smiling. So that sort of ambiguity of expression. And also it looks like a real thinking person. Making a portrait of somebody, I'm a portrait artist myself, and making a portrait of somebody is very difficult, especially not just making it look like them, but making it look like a real person who's thinking. And, I'm not Leonardo, nor is anyone. it is, his ability to do these sort of things are magical and just go beyond anything. I have another reproduction here. This is it's good in that it's a very high resolution. I can show you how close up we can get. Uh, these are those hands. You can see every little crack in the paint. Some of which have little highlights on them. However this was lit, you can see the highlights on the cracks, which interferes with seeing whatever forms are underneath. It's also in need of cleaning. But here, just look at this transition for part of the sleeve, the light part of the sleeve going into darkness. This is going to be important later on when we get to the Baroque, because, well, actually not in this class, but in other classes in the Baroque, this is very influential. This having forms picked out of the darkness with light is a feature of the Baroque. Then we have this landscape. It's one that Leonardo makes up, and he apparently liked this sort of primeval landscape of the world without people in it, I guess you could call it. Just really craggy, sharp, craggly rocks, and then this distant, wild landscape of going into colors, getting bluer and more blue-green as you go farther back, and lighter as you get further until it just disappears into the sky. There's a bridge out here that coincides with her shawl going this way, or you could follow it going down this way, so that the figure ground problem is resolved in this sense linearly by having part of the figure look like it belongs to outside of the figure, among other solutions to the figure ground problem. Okay, now let's look at another one of his works. Let's zoom out so you can see it. This is the Last Supper, also one of the most famous pictures in the world. It was commissioned to be a fresco on the wall of a refectory in Milan. Leonardo left Florence to get work. He wanted to have a patron, somebody to give him a kind of a salaried position so he could do his stuff without having to worry about getting commissions, and without having unlimited time to finish his projects, which was good for him. He went to the Sforzas in Milan, and he got this job, and he thought he was going to do all sorts of engineering jobs for him, and he did a few, some civil engineering type things for him. But he also did lots of drawings with military stuff that most of it didn't get used. But he was asked to do occasional paintings. One of them was the Madonna of the Rocks we saw before, and this one was for the Santa Maria della Grazie. It was the Sforza was a patron of that church and the monastery there, and so he asked Leonardo to make this painting. And Leonardo, he was supposed to be a fresco, as I said, and frescoes are they're not the medium for Leonardo. Frescoes have to be done very quickly. You have fresh plaster you put on, and you have a very short duration of time where you can paint the thing, and you can't fix anything, and you can't do anything subtle. It's a very demanding sort of medium, and you have to be very disciplined to do it, and it didn't work for Leonardo. I don't think he did any frescoes that I know of. He wanted to make a great big oil painting, but he had to paint it on the wall. His solution was to try to come up with some new medium that no one had ever thought of before, of painting directly onto the wall with some sort of chemical process or mixture of things that he thought would work, and as it turned out, didn't, because it started to ruin before he was finished. It started cracking. There's a problem with the wall itself. Milan has a high water table, and so masonry of walls they're kind of damp. And I don't know if fresco would even have worked or lasted very well under the climate of Milan. But this didn't work at all. This was a disaster. He painted it, and it was instantly proclaimed a wonder of the world. People would come and copy it. People come all over to look at the thing. But as you know, very shortly after it was made, it was deteriorating fast, and within a generation, it was almost invisible. You couldn't read the whole picture at all. And the monks cut a door through it. That's what this part is right here. They cut a door because they figured the painting itself was a complete loss. And in the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, the people have been working on it to clean it and to remove all of the previous attempts to clean it and repaint it, so as to remove all the paint that isn't by Leonardo. And this is what we have left. It's a ruin of its original, and you can just sort of see a ghost of what it might have been in the past. But knowing Leonardo and what his other works look like, it was probably a magnificent thing. As a high Renaissance exemplar, it has... I just tried to move the mouse and it got connected again. It's a cordless mouse. The entire composition is not pyramidal, but Jesus here is in the center. It's a symmetrical composition. He is himself a triangle, in fact, an equilateral triangle right in the center. And if you continue his arms out, he does make these lines here continue on to make a triangle on its base so that it's a very stable thing. He also is in the middle of a big X. If you look at the corner of the picture going through him, through his face, cross right at his face, right in the center. So he's just nailed down right in the middle, so as to make it perfectly stable and calm. Now, there's action going on. This is the moment when Christ says, "One of you will betray me," and so you have a group of 12 people all reacting, some of them violently or in deep distress over this statement, but they all behave in this action in a very contained way. So you have 3 people contained right here, 3 over here, 3 here, 3 here, and they're all on a line of the horizon line, some above, some below, but all sort of hanging on this clothesline, so as to make it, in case you were thinking anything might move too much as to get out of hand, it's all controlled. One of the wonders of this thing is Leonardo's study of individual humans. Each person in here is an individual. They are particular. He looked at people, found good faces, and drew them, and he has lots of drawings, preparatory drawings for this, where he, especially this guy here, I forget which one is which. There's James here. There's a nice drawing of James. All these preparations so as to make it, you could identify all of the people, and you could see how each reacts differently. And so that he poured an enormous amount of thought into all of the humanity of things to make it as real as possible. Though there is this sort of tension between what is real and what is ideal. Because in a real world, you don't have 13 people sitting on one side of a table. You don't normally have people right in dead center of things. But they've created an artificial world. When I say they, I mean high Renaissance artists. They create an artificial world that is ideal. And ideal is not real. It is what the world would be if everything were perfect in the way you want it. Especially in the high Renaissance, what they wanted was a world of decorum and gravitas and perfection and symmetry and timelessness. Okay, there's a lot that could be said about that, but we need to move on. The next work is by Raphael. Now, Raphael's much younger. He's like a generation younger than Leonardo. Leonardo was born in 1452, I think. Raphael was born 1483, I guess. He didn't live very long, but he had he made a lot more paintings in his short career than Leonardo did. His paintings are characterized, they're high Renaissance pictures, all of them, but what characterizes Raphael is that he assimilates. He takes works by other people and the innovations that were made by other people in the Renaissance, and blends them together to make his own style. He was taught by Perugino, and if you remember the delivery of the keys and the style of it, it was a Renaissance work before the High Renaissance, and it has a clarity of light. It has sweetness, the little tilts of the head that you have here. This is a Perugino thing, and this kind of face is like a Perugino face. This particular version of the ideal female face. This landscape is very much like any Urbino and landscape that Perugino would have done, and Raphael did. Many times. This sort of, it's very clear. It's completely unlike Leonardo's distant landscape. There's a mystery here, and the lighting of the whole thing is very much like a Perugino. What he gets from Leonardo is, for one, is the volume of the figure. It seems more stout, more the gradation of tone, so as to get the maximum amount of volume out of each form is a Leonardo thing. This pose of the Christ child, it has this spiral twist to it, which is kind of neat, and it's a very massive kind of baby. That the weight of it, and I guess you call it the gravitas of it, is a Leonardo thing, and makes it a High Renaissance thing. Also, the colors is Leonardo. I don't think ever did any colors like this where they were so stark and clear. The green, the red, the blue, as the yellow of the hair. All of this, the primary colors, secondary colors, so as to be pretty and decorative. I mean, he had the clients who were, commissioned these things, or he did a lot of them. This is all the small Cowper Madonna. There's lots of these Madonnas, and he was good at it, and he was very popular with it. But he didn't, as far as I know, innovate anything. All of the things that he have are mixtures, blends of other people's works. Let's look at another portrait. I have in your list. I have this one and this one side by side, because they're pendant pairs of portraits. They are a married couple, and the paintings go in a pair. I don't have an illustration of them side by side, but let's look at this pose. This is the Mona Lisa pose. Raphael went to see Leonardo while he was painting the Mona Lisa, and he saw it and was influenced by it. So this pose comes directly from Leonardo, but very little else did. When you look at all of the other features, the bright light, looks like this tree. This is very much like a Perugino. You look at Perugino's, look him up, Google him. You'll see this tree over and over, and also the clear landscape, the clouds, the sky. The lighting, the overall lighting is from Perugino. But these sleeves and this textures, the jewelry, all this other stuff is Flemish. This very much like any of the Flemish painters and their portraits, to have the volume of each fold, the pattern conforming to the shape of every fold. That's a very Flemish thing, and so they were the later Renaissance people were influenced through the Portinari altarpiece, but also by the time you get to the later Renaissance, they had more examples of things to look at. And because this was a commission portrait, and it was finished and delivered, and it was made to order like the patron wanted, unlike anything that Leonardo did, it wanted everything to be clear, and that showing off the wealth of the patron. You have many examples in the north of patrons asking artists to paint pictures so that it shows them how wealthy they are and how dignified they are. Here's the male portrait of the pendant, and it has the same sort of background with He's got the big red sleeves and the black garment here in the middle. It's a wonderful design, but it's still the Mona Lisa over again, just with the reverse pose. This arm here creating a great big mass and foreshortening, giving him more stature, giving him more gravitas, I guess. Uh, um, Again, he's blending things. He's when he takes something from Leonardo, he takes just the bit that he needs for this picture, and when he needs, he takes the bits from Perugino, puts that together. Later, we're going to see where he gets things from Michelangelo and incorporates those into his work. Everything he did, I think, was derivative, I guess you could say. But his particular blending of things becomes almost the symbol of what is Renaissance to later generations. When the Baroque think back to the Renaissance, they think of Raphael as being the main guy. I just want to show you. This is one other work. This is not on your list, but it's work. It's also a Raphael, and it's an example of another portrait. This one is Castiglione, but it's the same as the Mona Lisa in terms of its pose. Almost, the hands, the arms, the 3/4 part of the upper part of the body is in 3/4. The eyes looking straight out at you, and waist up, and just the whole composition. Other than the fact that it has a blank background rather than a distant landscape background. But this is, I can't tell you, emphasize too much how influential the Mona Lisa is for all portraits. So that's enough for Leonardo and Raphael, and we'll get on to the Michelangelos and also the other Raphael.